Be a little bit more cognizant of your body and your facial expressions and things like that after being on certain content or certain pages. I used to have this one page that every time I looked at it, I would just be like frowning and be like, I just do not like this. And then I thought like, why am I following it? Right? Like, like there's no need to follow. I would just notice that afterwards, my face just looked like my eyebrows were all the way down to my nose, and I'm like, well, then unfollow it, right? You don't have to announce that you're unfollowing, because I think that's people get confused. Like, we are not in an airport. You do not need to announce your departure, honey. I didn't need to know that.
That's a whole other thing. I am leaving for 2 weeks to
Yeah.
blah, blah, blah. Yeah.
Just being like, oh, well, I used to like your content, but I decided to unfollow. Oh, okay. Thank you. I don't know what you want me to do with that, but just looking at stuff like that, I typically try to look at stuff that like brings me joy. My work, centering the Black experience and working with Black mental health and Black disparities and anti-racism, it gets pretty heavy pretty quickly. So I'm also very mindful of how much of that information I take in. I always state I'm not going to read like Stamped from the Beginning and then 1619 and then Post-Traumatic Slavery Syndrome. No, I'm gonna break it up a little bit with some Nnedi Okorafor. I just got the new Intozaki Shank. Like I'm gonna break it up. So I'm also trying to be. It's not even just like the social media. It's all of this stuff you ingest. Like everything um, is what we're ingesting. We're taking in so many things. So like, look at your TV shows and look at even the music you listen to. I have. It's called hype music for a reason. If I'm going into some form of a remediation or something like that, I am not about to be listening to DMX. I need to take a minute. Like I was just like, this is not the right playlist to discuss mindfulness. I need to,
Right.
so
Right.
I try to be very good at setting up my environment, but being aware. I think some people think, oh, it's just one thing, but it's everything. The music, what puts me in the right mood and the right mindset, and just looking at that with social media, because even if you're looking at certain content, you can always say not interested. I'm never going to tell you not to get on social media. I'm just going to say just be aware of everything that you're ingesting. What you're ingesting is not just your food. It's who you're around. Do people around you align with your values? Have you even identified your values to know that this person does not align, and that's why there's conflict? Like just slowing it down a bit.
Exactly. All relationships,
All
all
relationships.
relationships that run into something
Yeah.
are typically about a values misalignment. What is this world that we're creating around ourselves? And I think that that's the thing about your message that resonates so much with me, which is that we're here, as far as I know, like this is it. And so, what you want during this lifetime, it's up to each one of us to create what we want for our family legacy, what we want for the kind of work we do, the way that we want to feel. Those are things that are within our control. Those are things that, if we're willing to take some accountability for the ways that we are living in here, our emotional and mental health, we an incredible amount of power and ability to live a life that's in better alignment with who we truly are.
Yeah, I think it's the aspect of identifying values and then also boundaries, right? One of the things is I feel like people identify boundaries incorrectly a lot. Like boundaries guide your behavior and rules guide someone else's. You only have control over you.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of times I would see these articles about like what to do when so and so violates your boundaries. And I'm like, well, that's not possible, because the only person who can violate your boundaries is you. An appropriate article would be questions to ask yourself when you have violated your boundaries so it doesn't happen again. Because it happens, right? But what got in the way of you violating that boundary? Was it the relationship with the person? It was your mom or your dad, and you don't feel comfortable standing up to that? Was it the fact that you were so exhausted and you wanted the conversation to end, so you just agreed to whatever to get them out of your face? Well, we need to be mindful of how we're feeling in our body before we have these conversations. Was it the fact that you keep moving your boundary back and forth so you don't even know where your boundary is? You know, so I think that's the issue. People will state that like, oh, I'm setting up boundaries and they violated my boundary, but it's like, well, they violated a rule that you set. And I'm not saying that rules don't have their role as well, but if someone violates a rule that you set or they set or that you've agreed upon, they can violate that rule, but your boundary can still stay firm because it's what you set up, right? So I think that's an issue. And then also just the living a value driven life, like identifying what your values are. And I see this come up in relationships a lot because I identify what my values are individually. I also identify what, my husband and I have talked about what our values are as a family. And when it comes out as parenting, one of the exercises I sometimes tell family members to do is like, we'll do a value identification exercise. We'll talk about what's important to you, not as important to you, what you're interested in, what you're not. And then they come up with family values. And if they come up with like a family crest and stuff like that, it's very much like a unifying experience. And if they decide to be like, okay, this is what we're going to identify with, as long as it aligns with your values and it's not incredibly inconvenient, I find that it also makes decision making a lot easier. Like, oh, well, I'm having a disagreement with my son because he said he wanted to dye his hair green, and like that is absurd. And I'm like, okay, well, what what does that violate for you or for your family boundary wise? And it's like, well, I just don't like it. And I'm like, oh, okay. Well, that's not really a value, right? Is it incredibly inconvenient? No. I'm like, okay. Are you all right with acknowledging the fact that no, you don't like green hair, and it also doesn't impact you in any specific way other than the fact that you don't want to get looks at church? Well, then I kind of think that the green hair is coming. I think the green hair is going to stay.
As always, please share, like, comment, and let someone know about this podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time.